This is the worst bike that Honda have ever made. They got it completely wrong. So wrong, in fact, that it forced the king of Supercross to flee the brand entirely. But how bad is it really? Did Honda truly make a backward step with this bike, the 1997 CR250? Well, today, we're going to find out. Later on in the video, we'll be pitching the 97 CR250 against its predecessor, the 1996 bike, which is widely regarded as a fantastic machine, to work out whether the first alley frame Honda truly was worse than the bike that came before. But first, let's head back in time to the mid-90s to set the scene for the arrival of Honda's most famous mistake. If you were asked to name the most iconic, influential and successful brand in motocross, I think most people would answer Honda without thinking. I mean, they literally have built perfect motorcycles. Just ask Ricky Carmichael or Jet Lawrence. And for a long time, Honda truly were the kings of the sport. They dominated 500cc GPs in the 1980s, and that dominance continued into the 90s over in the US. Honda won 9 250 Supercross championships in a row, with McGrath winning 4 of those on the bounce, as well as 7 250 national championships in 8 years. During that time, Honda could seemingly do no wrong. But 1997 would mark the end of an era. After 4 straight Supercross championships and 1 outdoor national title in 1995, Jeremy McGrath had become the sport's biggest star, and his name was absolutely synonymous with Honda. He'd been with them for his entire career and they had won a lot together. In 1996, on board a CR250, MC won 14 out of 15 Supercross main events. Together, McGrath and Honda were truly an unstoppable force. So, as the 1996 season came to a close, it was absolutely unimaginable to the masses that McGrath might leave Honda. It was a thought that hadn't even crossed his mind either, until he rode the 1997 CR250. MC was in the middle of some fairly intense contract negotiations with Honda when they began testing for the 1997 season. And unfortunately for Honda, the quality and performance of this new machine was the final straw for the king. He wanted out of there. So at the 11th hour, just weeks before the first round of the 97 season, McGrath took the #1 plate and fled from Honda to set up a last-minute Suzuki team. In a recent podcast with Jason from Gypsy Tales, McGrath talked about this split with Honda, and he had some choice words for the 97 machine. Here's some quotes. So McGrath said, "The aluminium frame was unbelievable," which didn't sound too bad. But then he went on to say, "I would have ridden anything to get off that Honda. When I started riding that bike in the off-season, it was like I'd forgotten how to ride. What in the world happened? I could not ride that bike." And these are my 2 favourites here at the end. This is a quote from Jeremy McGrath on the Gypsy Tales podcast. "It had to be the worst bike ever made." And the final one, simply 2 words: death machine. So yeah, that's got me right excited to give this bike a test. So what did they actually change between seasons? Well, the main thing, and the thing that caught all of the headlines, was the aluminium frame. This was brand new in the motocross world. Some factory bikes had had aluminium frames in the past, and alley frames had been a thing in the road bike world for about 10 years. But this was the first time that a production motocross bike had used an aluminium frame. Back in the day, the bike looked futuristic and striking. To my modern eyes, it doesn't look that futuristic looking, but this is what motocross bikes looked like when I was growing up, so that explains that. The bike was absolutely beautiful. We've got some stock graphics here. We got them made up recently by Anthony Moore over in the States in Florida. His company is Evo MX. Check him out. I'll put some links in the description down below. He hooked us up with the graphics here on the rad shrouds and the awesome seat cover. We also got some number boards done by LR Designs here in the UK. They're close to us. We went with the number 1 because that's what this bike should have been rocking in 1997. McGrath should have taken the number 1 plate onto this machine, but as we know, that's not quite how it transpired. In terms of suspension for 1997, Honda swapped out KYB for Showa. The motor had a few changes and upgrades as well. There was a new flat top piston, a new power jet carb, and a new ignition system that featured an early example of traction control. The bike featured a big single rad at the front that supposedly increased cooling efficiency by 150%. And finally, the seat, it was more modern, it was flat, it was hard, and it gave the bike this slim, sleek, futuristic look. So now it's time to hit the track and find out what those changes actually did to this bike, and whether it truly is as bad as they say. Okay. So what did the 97 CR250 actually ride like then? We're giving it a go here today. Whoa! And famously this bike, the new aluminium chassis, was very, very stiff. And I can feel that instantly here today. It's very harsh on these little braking bumps here. It's not very rough today, but it feels it on this bike. Now, why did that happen? Why was it so stiff? Well, a Honda test rider from the time, his name slips on my mind right now, but he's been on record to say that they did have this alley frame quite nice early in the beginning of the development process of the 97 machine. Yeah, they had the chassis feeling quite nice early on in the development process. It wasn't so stiff, flexed a bit more, but Honda got spooked with the aluminium and they got scared of potential cracking or breaks in the frame. So they kept piling on metal, kept piling on the aluminium to the chassis to make it stronger, but in turn that did make it a lot stiffer. Which resulted in this harsh ride. So I could feel it straight away, man. And that stiff frame caused problems with suspension as well. They just didn't know how to set their suspension up for that chassis. So when the bike was released, suspension settings were definitely not optimal for sure. Now in terms of the motor, oh, that does not feel good into those turns, choppy bumps. In terms of the motor, Honda were famed for having some of the best motors in the game at the time. And the 97 was no different. It lacked a little off the bottom compared to the 96. But mid to top, it was the king of the class. It's just whether you can actually use that power with that chassis, and the suspension played so much havoc. The riders feel and confidence. It appears as though with the 1997 bike, Honda radically changed a machine that just didn't need fixing, which is crazy especially when the 1996 CR is widely considered to be the best 250 of the 90s. And from my very first lap on this bike, I could tell that it was going to be a tough machine to tame. It was by no means the worst bike I've ever ridden, but perhaps it was the most difficult and the most tiring as well. Regardless of skeptical reviews from riders like me, the 1997 CR250 was a massively hyped machine. It was the most radical new CR since 1981, and that exotic aluminium frame had riders frothing at the mouth. The bike was actually delayed getting to showrooms, and the rumours circulating at the time said that was because Honda had found some cracks in the frames. But the official word said that the delay was caused by some suspension components arriving late to the factory. But when the new bikes did eventually land, contemporary reviews weren't that bad. They said it was a harsh bike and maybe better suited to pro riders. And some reviews were even quite kind to the new generation CR. But history and the result sheets tell a very different story. Obviously we know what happened with MC, but despite that PR nightmare, the CR250 from 1997 was still a huge sales success, which meant that a few weeks into the new season, there were a lot of disappointed Honda riders at the track. Honda took a huge plunge here. Being the first OEM to go into production with an aluminium frame machine, they were the guinea pigs and they paid the consequences. After the release of this bike in 1997 and the subsequent departure of McGrath, Honda wouldn't win another title in the US for another 6 years, until Ricky Carmichael came along and completed the very first perfect season. Now, was that dry spell for Honda simply down to the fact that their aluminium frame bikes just weren't that good? Or was it more like everyone else had gotten better and caught up? Well, in an effort to answer that question, we've cooked up a very special little shootout. Whether it's a new bike or an old two-stroke like this, the 1997 CR250, which is perhaps one of the most controversial bikes that Honda have ever produced, we make sure we use the best stuff, and that's Putoline MX9 two-stroke oil. We use it in all of our two-strokes, and you guys should too. There's links in the description down below where you can learn more. As always, a big thank you goes to Putoline for supporting what we do. We're here at Doncaster Motor Park today for what we think will be a seriously interesting two-stroke shootout. Obviously we've got our lovely looking 97 CR250, but we've also got this Lee Larkin's steel frame bike as well. So a big thanks to Lee for bringing this along for us today to try out. Riding the bikes today and putting down the hot laps will be Ed Bradley, who we know is a renowned test rider, but he also raced both of these bikes back in the day at the highest level. So he'll be providing some awesome insights as well. We're about ready to hit the track. Ed's just going to do his final setup adjustments underneath the tent. And while I'm talking about the tent, actually, our awesome sponsors 24MX have a great promotion for the race tent going on at the moment until the 28th of March 2024. So if you're looking for an easy to set up pit tent at a great price, check them out. I'll put some links in the description down below. Let's get these bikes set up, let's hit the track. The steel frame is going first. Now on board Lee's bike, which is actually a 1995 CR250. Lee had a 96 and a 95. His 96 was a bit tuned up, so we decided to go with the bone stock 95. They're pretty much the same machine, the 95 and a 96. Ed's on the hot lap now on board the steel frame Honda. Let's see what it's made of. wrap up on the 1995 steel frame Honda CR250. Ed's going to give us a quick review rundown of what it feels like to ride this almost 30-year-old bike.
How it feels is very different to what the Honda bikes are like now. The back end of the seat feels quite high. The suspension is really soft, especially on the back. Front end has so much flex in the fork. You go in and the wheel stays where it is, and the bike kind of like bends around it. A fun bike to ride, and the thing that is really good about it is the motor.
Yeah.
The motor is so smooth off the bottom, it revs really well, and it's such a lovely, friendly motor.
Did it bring back some good memories?
Many. There's a turn on the track just over there when we come onto the track, and it's just, you stick the bike into the rut, open the throttle up, you've got that lovely crisp as it comes out, and you can't beat that feeling of that noise and the feeling when you match both together.
Yeah. So we're thinking the motor on that's going to be roughly the same, it's just, we'll see what that chassis is like. Yeah. All right, let's get on the 97. So Ed jumped on board the 1997 CR250 straight away. Track conditions were exactly the same. There were some other riders out on circuit to deal with, but Ed got straight into the thick of it, started having some fun on the 97 CR250. So we see Ed here just warming up on the bike, getting the machine warmed up as well. He's just readjusting, trying to figure things out on board the bike. Obviously this thing's going to feel a lot different to the 1995 bike that he's just been out on. So watch closely, see if Ed's riding style changes at all. Watch to see if the bike reacts to certain things on the track in different ways. Keep a close eye on things here as Ed gets warmed up on board the 97 aluminium framed Honda CR250. So once Ed had finished his first warm-up laps on board the 1997, I was really interested and intrigued to hear his initial reactions to the bike and his first comparisons between this one and the steel frame version that he just rode a few moments before. So Ed stopped trackside to give us the rundown and give us some thoughts and insights before he started to step things up a little on board the 97 CR250. Just give us your first impressions comparing this to the previous generation.
So immediately the handlebars are a lot higher, it's a much more sit-up and beg bike. Actually, what I liked about it was that with the chassis being a little bit firmer, the power to the ground is better. So it was easier to clear jumps because the power was getting down to the ground quicker. From that respect, I enjoyed that. So there's less comfort than the old bike, than the previous bike, and there's more performance from it. And I wouldn't like to know what it's like on the braking bumps and stuff like that, because you can feel the harshness of it starting to come through. But the initial part, like out of the turns and accelerating, the power to the back wheel is a lot better, it's a lot more direct. On the old bike, it kind of like, you can feel it going like that, whereas this just goes down and forward. And that translates to making it easy to do the jumps. So.
Ed's back out on track now and he's starting to step things up on board the 1997 bike. He's getting the hang of things now and getting the feel for the bike. That's Josh Spinks there on the 2024 KTM 450. He's a top level British Championship rider. He's about to become the carrot for Ed to chase on board the old 250. And look at that, the drone's been filled in just as Ed is stepping things up on board the 97. So sit back and enjoy. Ed's about to twist it on board the 97. Let's see what this bike is made of. Okay, Ed, so you've ridden both bikes, you had a bit of time to digest the experience. What were the differences between the aluminium frame from 97 and then the steel frames from the generation before?
The main thing that stood out really was the comfort. The 95 was very soft, very comfortable. The back end feels so soft that you'd expect it to be kicking you off and chucking you out the seat, whereas the seat bouncing off the jump faces and everything, it still felt like it had good control, and it felt old school. It was very soft and placid and comfy to ride. It definitely felt like it was from a different era. The brakes weren't very good at slowing the bike down, which was noticeable. The power was so smooth, so tractable off the bottom end, revved really well into the top end, and that was the strong point of the bike. It was very easy to keep the momentum going, build it up, build the speed up going around the turns.
So then you jumped onto this literally back to back, and what were your thoughts going through your head? Because obviously this got a pretty bad rap back in the day.
It did, and my memories of riding them were that it was a very harsh and very stiff bike. Quite surprising when we got on it this time, because engine-wise, a lot less bottom end. It was a very harsh hit in the middle. With the chassis is stiffer, but the power to the ground was more direct. So it was easier to clear the jumps because you just wait for the hit, but then once you got the hit and the bike was moving forward, then the stiffness of the bike actually meant that it got good drive.
Yeah, it's effective.
Yeah, it was effective. Bit of harshness on the braking bumps. The braking bumps weren't massive out there, but it was just enough to notice that it was that harsh feeling was there.
Yeah. Over the years since this bike came out, obviously most machines are now aluminium framed, and generally things have got stiffer. From a modern rider's point of view, how did this compare?
That was really interesting. So we talk about the old bike. The 95 bike felt like it was an old school bike. It reminded me actually a little bit like the 490 Mokos that we raced around Farley, in so much that it was smooth, you could, and just really comfortable. There's a lot of flex in it. So I was kind of expecting that this bike would be more rigid and harsh like it was last time, like I remember back in the day when we were racing.
But it wasn't as shocking maybe as you remembered it being?
No, absolutely. Back in the day in the 90s when you're racing, there is a night and day difference between the comfort and the flexibility in the steel frame to the aluminium frame being so much more direct. At the time that was a huge difference in how the bike performed. Whereas now, if you ride the 97 and compared to a modern bike, then the feeling is actually a lot closer to that than you would be the 95, 96 Hondas.
Combining your knowledge from back in the day and what you've experienced today, can you see why McGrath wanted to get off this bike after he tested it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like I said, it's night and day. The difference between the steel chassis and the aluminium one, it really is night and day, and it's so much stiffer than the previous model. So
let's just score the two bikes. Let's do a little shootout here. Let's score the bikes. So Power, who's taking the win there?
Definitely the 95. The jet and the power, the delivery of it was fantastic. Yeah.
Chassis and handling?
Chassis and handling, well, it's pretty close. You've got two different types. You've got the comfort, you've got the flexibility. I'd actually go with the 97.
Yeah, as a modern rider, you're picking the 97.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brakes?
Brakes were crap on both. So the front brake actually had the same characteristic. It just didn't. You squeeze it as hard as you like and it didn't slow down. So. And
suspension, because I'd heard that suspension on this was difficult to set up because I just couldn't work out what to do with the new chassis.
Yeah, where do you go with it? The suspension on the 95 is so soft. It handled well, but it was old school. And the suspension on the 97 was more direct, and as the track out there is quite soft, it actually cut through the dirt quite well because it was that little bit stiffer. So in these conditions it helped. Put us on a hard packed track, clay, then we might be talking a different story. Yeah.
At the end of the day, which one of these bikes would you prefer to race around Hawkstone Park for 30 minutes, around Farley Castle? Which one would you be picking at, say, Fox Hills VMXD, and which one would you go for?
I'd be going with the 97.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
just purely for the direct feedback that you're getting on the ground. The 95 that we've been riding has got so much flexibility in it, a lot of comfort, but it just absorbs everything rather than moving it forward, I think.
That's really, really surprising. You guys know that we usually finish off these videos with a hot lap showdown, and that was the plan today, wasn't it?
It was.
You laid down a hot lap on the 95, and we were about to set the stopwatch going on this, but we had a gearbox issue and we didn't want to risk the bike and we didn't want to risk Ed, more importantly. So we've put a pause on that. We've got to get the bike looked at, we'll get it sorted. And if you guys want to see it, we'll come back to do a hot lap showdown between our 97 and Lee's 95. So let us know in the comments if you do want to see that, and we'll make it happen. Ed, thanks so much today for lending your services and
No problem, thank you for the invite.
being brave enough. Not many people would want to do this. I said it earlier in the video, McGrath's quotes on this bike did not paint it in a good picture. The word death machine was said. So thank you for coming to do that. Thanks to Dan on the drone, Lee who brung his 95 bike, what a legend. As always, you've been watching 999 Laser. My name's Max. Till next time, we'll see you at the track.